Hello and welcome to the Circling the Bases podcast. My name is DJ Short, and back with me here is my co host, Drew Silva. The MLB trade deadline is fast approaching. What are we, about 4 days from that August 2nd deadline? And we've already seen a couple of deals go down, including Andrew Benintendi to the Yankees on Wednesday. Still a lot to be determined in advance of Tuesday's trade deadline. And in order to dig into all that, we're happy to be joined by JP Morosi of MLB Network and also contributing right here at NBC Sports. JP, thanks so much for coming on the show. We're big fans of your work.
Thanks, DJ and Drew. This is one of the very best times of the baseball year. I love it. I love it because I get probably the highest number of questions from fans this year, at this time of year than almost any other time of year. Because to be honest, the World Series, it's always hard to project who's going to win the World Series. But at the deadline, like, we're supposed to know. Like today, just going around town. Hey, Morosi, where's Juan Soto going? Guys, I'm trying to find out. Okay, like I promise you, as soon as I know this, I will let you know. But it's a lot of fun, and I'm really thrilled to be talking to you guys. Thanks so much for the invite, and you guys do a great job. So it's my pleasure.
For someone who like tracks news the way that you do, yeah, this is like Christmas. And DJ and I have followed your work for a long time. One of the most thorough newsbreakers out there, I would say. You never put out something that seems flimsy. And I'm a huge hockey fan too, like you are, but we'll save DJ and the listeners all that stuff, as you can tell by all the Blues paraphernalia.
Love it. And by the way, the quick parenthetical, I will say this, and I'm going to give an homage to Drew's hometown. One of my favorite team-related social media things I've ever seen was the Blues putting out this little clip from rookie development camp, and you've probably seen this, of the Blues mentioning various parts of St. Louis and asking the young players to pronounce them. The best part of it is one of their young prospects was actually from Quebec, and so he's pronouncing the French words in St. Louis correctly. But here comes the buzzer. And it's not crève coeur, it's crève coeur. And so like the way that it's like ding ding ding, it's like none of it sort of makes sense unless you spend a lot of time there, which I just loved. I love like local linguistic things, and that just like warmed my heart, made me laugh. It was perfect.
Yeah, there's like they had street names like we call it Gravois, but it's Gravois, or Spady, but it's like I don't even know how to do that one.
And then it's not Bellefontaine, it's Bellefountain. So Bolduc pronounces it as a Bellefontaine. Oh, wrong, it's Bellefountain actually. So well done, perfectly said.
There's a Shoto Avenue, we call it Shoto, and he's like Chateau. Yeah, that was really great.
Houston and Houston Street in the
exactly.
City,
well said, DJ. I love it. That is, there are those street names that instantly mark you as a local or not, and both New York and St. Louis have them. I love it.
But whenever you tweet something hockey, I like to read the comments on those sometimes because it's like announce Soto. No one cares about hockey.
I know. Oh, that's exactly. I'm lucky that by working for NHL Network, I can at least say, hey, it is part of my job. Yes, it is true that a majority of my job is baseball, but I can at least say it is a part of my job. So I appreciate that, Drew. And yes, a lot of great memories of covering the Blues during that Stanley Cup Finals run, and of course winning the Cup there in 2019.
Yeah, I mean, we might ask you about Juan Soto.
Yeah, I was going to say,
go for it. Yeah, I'm sorry. I digress.
Spoiler alert.
I sometimes do digress, but please, on with the trade deadline. My apologies.
Well, one thing I'll say is, like, with the expanded playoffs, have you noticed sort of an uptick in enthusiasm from fan bases? Just because if you're 500, you got a shot. Like, Orioles fans should be excited right now.
Oh yeah, they definitely should. Now, certainly, I'm speaking to you from my beloved home state of Michigan, where I would say the postseason enthusiasm is not exactly at an all-time high, but we are building there hopefully at some point in the future. But you're right, and that's where the Orioles for me are a favorite topic of mine, because I think that it's very subjective. But guess what? A lot of things in baseball still are, because a lot of it has to do with ownership and where a management team is and what the expectations are internally. The Orioles fans have had to deal with losing for a long time. And so for me, this might not sound logical to everybody, but I'm going to say it anyway. The Orioles, to me, there is a better argument from where I sit for Baltimore to be a buyer of at least the right sort of controllable pitching than it is the White Sox. The White Sox have disappointed all season long. They have not really shown that energy and that second half push that you expect of a contending team. They've just been mediocre to below mediocre all season long without a ton of momentum that tells me that they're going to be the team that we thought they were going to be in spring training. Whereas the Orioles, when you have asked your fan base to be this patient for this long, I really think it's incumbent on the ownership and the front office to reward that. And they should not trade Trey Mancini. I understand that in a vacuum, proper asset management, sure. Do I think they're going to beat the Yankees in the playoffs? No. But sometimes making it is a worthwhile endeavor. When the Pirates ended their drought, it mattered that they got to the wild card game and hosted it. Okay, that was important. And I think it's important that we consider the context in saying buy or sell or hold for certain teams. If you're Baltimore, and if you have the right controllable arm, if Pablo Lopez is available, get him. Because he's going to help your team in what is beginning to be an opening of a competitive window. The White Sox, for me, their window might be closing without them ever having actually won something. And I think that's why we have to not just look at the granular numbers of, okay, well, this team is above 500, therefore they should buy. Well, I'm not so sure of that. I think you have to consider how patient the fans have been, what the overall environment is around the team. And the Orioles are a team that I believe should reward the patience of their fans by at the very least holding and probably buying if it's the right long-term pitching.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like Mancini and Jorge Lopez is going to get you like a huge haul of prospects anyway.
Right.
Like, if they get a little starting pitching depth and get those pitchers into that ballpark, which has become pitcher friendly all of a sudden with the left field wall moved back. I mean, who's to say they can't get one of those wild card spots? They might even, I mean, they would be like the team that I would root for to get one.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know. They've generated so much excitement. I get that this is still a rebuilding operation, but if you've got a little taste of success and you've got a chance to, put yourself over the Guardians, like it's not like a loaded field there in the AL wildcard race. They can totally compete, I think, with the energy they've shown, the comeback wins that they've had.
Yeah.
I know that's like kind of intangible stuff, but actually maybe it is tangible stuff that they're coming back and winning baseball games and they're doing it in all kinds of ways. They're one of my favorite teams to like tune into on MLB TV right now.
Yeah, for sure.
And yes, and Drew, you're exactly right. And the other part about this and where the subjective somewhat gives way to the objective is they're a relevant team now. Relevant. The fans there care about them. Yeah. And when you build up an organization and sort of open that competitive window, fans want to buy tickets and interact with your team and engage with the product, which is the team on the field. And that becomes very tangible very quickly. It's just, to me, you're asking a lot of fans to be patient longer than the results suggest they should have to be patient. Okay. Like the results are starting to look good. Boston, perfect example. I think Baltimore should buy or at least hold. Boston should probably sell.
Yeah.
Because you look at that team, I realize their records are very similar, but Boston has key guys who are in the final year of their deal or they can opt out. JD and Bogarts and Devers deals coming up. For Boston, do you trade Bogarts and JD and then sign Devers long-term? I would say this. I actually made this comment a couple of days ago, and I fully believe it. If you told a Red Sox fan on this day, you could have two options. Option one, you keep everybody together, make the playoffs, and win a round, but lose in the division series or the ALCS, and then you eventually lose Devers. So win, have a good year, make the playoffs, but lose Devers in the long term. Or trade Bogarts and JD, take that savings, improve the farm system, sign Devers long term, and miss the playoffs. I really believe Red Sox fans would choose option two. They really would.
I think so.
And look at this. And so for me, making the playoffs means way less to the Red Sox and the White Sox than it does to the Orioles, and more importantly, the Orioles fans. Similarly, the Mariners fans, it means a lot to them.
Oh yeah.
And so I think we have to understand where we're at with some of these organizations and what their fan bases see. There's not a way that I see the Red Sox beating the Astros or the Yankees in a 7-game series.
Sure.
And that's, to me, in Boston, that's a failed season. But if the Orioles lose in the ALDS to the Yankees, hey, that's a pretty great year. Same thing, honestly, with the Mariners, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think Pablo Lopez is a great example because you can be opportunistic, and it's not just about this year. It's about next year, and he could lead a rotation with Grayson Rodriguez when he's ready. DL Hall, John Means is eventually going to be back. Tyler Wells is, shown some ability there. So that would be a smart move for a team who has a lot of up the middle position player talent to supplement that rotation with an arm that could be there for another couple of years.
Very well said. Very well said.
There are a couple of controllable arms out there, like Frankie Montas, Luis Castillo. I doubt they would do the top level guys, but there are options out there where they can. This isn't just a rental situation.
Right. Exactly right. And I think that the final point I was going to make too is that when your farm system is as good as Baltimore's is and has been, like, you've got your cornerstone catcher. Mountcastle's going to be a guy for you for a long time. Hayes all of a sudden has become a dependable bat. You've got Santander. We'll see what his future looks like, and obviously they hope to sign Mancini. But I'm mentioning now multiple everyday players that they've already got. So if you've done your job well, and I believe Mike Elias has done his job well,
yes,
then you don't need to make this trade. To your point earlier, Drew, about what the value is going to be coming back. Like, so if Mancini in the last year of his deal gets you back a double-A starter who maybe is not in the top 100 prospects according to MLB pipeline for the overall industry, where's the value added there relative to what you've already got in house? You've done your job well. You've got a good foundation. Go play. It's different if you're the White Sox or the Red Sox who have work to do.
Right. And I think that's what this expanded playoffs has done is sort of make you rethink that logic where, if there was not this many playoff teams, the Orioles would obviously be a seller. There wouldn't even be any second thought to that. But there are these young teams on the rise that have some upside, and the Mariners are in there too. We're suddenly like, hey, we got an opportunity. And so I love how that's sort of changed the mindset around the trade deadline. I think that's a great place to start here. We will start with Juan Soto because everyone is talking about him, and they should be. He's a generational talent. A player like him only comes around so often, and he's still just 23 years old. It's amazing. So basically, whoever acquires Soto will not only get him for this year, but 2 more seasons before his free agency. Whether whoever acquires him will be able to sign him long term, who knows? But you're still going to get, potentially 3 postseasons out of Juan Soto. Let's just say that. So the teams that everyone's hearing about right now is potentially top contenders for his services: the Cardinals and the Padres. JP, is that sort of what you're hearing as the leading contenders, or is it a wider field than that?
I think both. I think those are the 2 leading contenders. I also think that more teams are involved at varying levels depending on how the market plays out. I have covered this sport too long to count out the Dodgers here, because we know that they've got probably the best farm system in the sport, at least the best farm system among the buying teams right now. So they can make this move if they want to. What I wonder is, if they made this move, how does that affect their plans for Trey Turner in the long term? I think the reality with the Dodgers, you look at the way this team is built and the outfield going forward. If you're not sure about where Bellinger fits long term, and obviously Muncy's coming off of a down year, Trey Turner's going to be a free agent after the season's over, you probably do need a bat, right? I mean, like, you probably, even with Freddie Freeman, even with Mookie, you probably need one more bat. And it'd be kind of nice if it's left-handed, just in case Muncy doesn't fully come back. And if you want to non-tender or move on from Bellinger, depending on how things play out, it'd be nice if it's a lefty. You've got Will Smith already there. You've got Betts, obviously Freddie. I think, you've got Lux from the left side too. I just think that when you look at the makeup of the Dodgers roster, Soto fits them very well. Their farm system is in great shape. Will Rhymes does a great job there as their farm director. Billy Gasparino has done a tremendous job bringing in talent from a domestic side on the scout as a scouting director. So for me, there's no chance I'm going to count out the Dodgers, especially because we know this: the Nationals and Dodgers just did a huge deal. By the way, how soon we forget, the Dodgers and Nationals did a massive deal a year ago when it just looked as if the Padres were going to get a superstar or two from the Nationals.
I did forget about that.
And like, here we are again. Okay, so guess who's not going to get super excited? Say, oh, the Padres got it in the bag. I'm not so sure about that. We got to wait a minute because even when it looked like the Padres were on the 1-inch line, here came Andrew Friedman, and they weren't on the 1-inch line all of a sudden. So I think that we got to remember that history. The Padres are a very aggressive team. We know they're desperate to get that splash and to win those potential superstar acquisitions away from the Dodgers. We know that they're lurking there in the distance. And again, it's the same exact rationale of why the Padres wanted Scherzer and Turner a year ago. And honestly, their failure to get them, maybe the Padres were going to miss the playoffs no matter what, but there's very little doubt for me that not having Scherzer and Turner last year hastened the demise of the Padres last season and the firing of Jay Stingler. I mean, that was a direct correlation. So I think the Padres, they don't have quite as much to trade anymore. The Mackenzie Gore injury this week doesn't help them. That's certainly a concern. But I think we cannot forget them because the Padres are sufficiently desperate, in my estimation. And AJ Preller, as we know, is always up for a big trade. Finally, I think the Cardinals, for me, what I like about them in this conversation is they have the right now piece to be a carrying piece in the deal. Whether it's Dylan Carlson, whether it's Nolan Gorman, they can give up a major league bona fide everyday player. I'd be surprised if they gave up Edman, but I think they've got players in the 0 to 3 range who are good, who are legitimate everyday players. And so I think that they've got that piece. They've got Mason Wynn, who had the best arm we saw at the Futures game, just so happens he plays shortstop. Jordan Walker, really good outfielder. They've got Liberatore as well. But the reason why we're talking about Soto, and he's admittedly not having that great of a year by his own standards. He's having a really good year. He's not having an MVP year. I think we should sort of keep that in mind a little bit as we talk about him. But remember this, Juan Soto is younger than 12 players who were in the Futures game. 12 of the stars of tomorrow, 12 promising young talents, the youngest bright stars in our game, are older than Juan Soto.
Yeah, I love when the conversation goes to like, oh, you got to keep your prospects. It's like this guy's 23. He just turned 23 years old too. He's like, like he is a prospect, like you said. He's the star of tomorrow. Yeah.
And one final point that I'll make on just sort of like the overall big picture Soto conversation. I find it funny, ironic funny, sort of humorous funny, when I've been asked, well, is there pressure on the team acquiring Soto to sign him long term? And the answer I give is no, because the dude has turned down $500 million. I don't think he's going to accept 440 was a no, but 441. You know what? No, I'm thinking about this one. No, he's just not going to sign unless the number starts with a 5. And so we're just not even going to have to worry about that. This trade is clear cut, period, the end, 2.5 years of Juan Soto. That's what you're getting. You're not going to get some extension and negotiate a contract. There's nothing happening like that. He's not going to sign for 441 or 442 or 444 in a week. That's not going to happen. So he clearly wants to be a free agent. So I think, honestly, it's kind of given clarity to the whole situation. It's let everybody off the hook. The Nationals can trade him with a clear conscience and say, look, we tried. We offered the guy darn near $500 million. And he said no. I mean, it's impossible for a Nationals fan, at least from where I sit, to say, oh, you were too cheap. Why didn't you keep him? No, he turned down $500 million. And they're not close to being as good as the Mets or the Braves or the Phillies right now. They're not close. So the Nationals, I absolve them of anything with respect to this. Certainly if we want to take issue with the Strasburg contract, fine. But this is the right decision to trade Juan Soto right now.
And one question about the Soto situation is Patrick Corbin's been mentioned a lot as potentially being attached to this trade to shed that salary. Does that have a real chance of happening? Because it seems to keep floating out there for some reason or another. I think an acquiring team would be like, sure, we'll do that. You know what I mean? If we have to give up less in the way of talent, but is that a real thing?
I don't think so. And Mike Rizzo has made some public comments along those lines this week to say that he's not going to do that. I think the Nationals, looking at their payroll, Nelson Cruz obviously has a short-term deal. Josh Bell's up, and he'll probably be traded in the next several hours at this point. Strasburg, obviously, and now we're not sure if they're able to collect insurance on his situation. It doesn't look as though he's close to pitching again anytime soon. So you're starting to wonder what payroll emergency exists that is necessitating them to trade Patrick Corbin's contract. I'm just not seeing it right now. A reason why you need to give up, why you need to sort of, to use Mike Rizzo's word, dilute the return by attaching a contract that you don't want any longer. I don't see that's going to be a plausible strategy. And by the way, if you're trading the contract, you're obviously doing it because you're hoping that the new team's going to take the whole thing, or at least a large portion of it. And like the Dodgers, they're right up against the luxury tax. They're not going to do that. So I don't know. It appears to me there's a certain logic to it. If you really had to make the move to afford player X in free agency to make sure that you cleared that money out, but they're not doing that. So I don't see it being a real actionable plan for the Nationals right now.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot with do you think this happens before Tuesday? Soto gets dealt. You want to put a percentage on that?
I do. I think it's probably like 70%.
Yeah,
I do. I just think that once you've walked down this far and you've got the right teams involved.
Yes, that's true.
Okay?
Oh, yeah.
Like this is not a year where, and this is why, I remember this. It's one of the things that I always keep in mind this time of year. In most cases, Doug Melvin told me this when he was the GM of the Brewers years ago, and I think he was totally correct. He said, in most cases, it makes sense to trade a position player in the offseason, trade your pitching in season because of a couple reasons. Number one, GMs are always more comfortable when they're seeing a pitcher in front of them all the time. Okay, this guy's velocity is good. He looks healthy. I saw him pitch 2 days ago. I'm comfortable with the risk. That, and everybody, if you're trading somebody who's valuable, like Luis Castillo, okay, he is better than every single contending team's fifth starter. Everybody. Yeah. Luis Castillo makes every team better immediately because he's taking the job of someone on this day whom he is objectively better than. Okay. Yeah. So the pitching always makes sense to trade at the deadline. Position player, if it's someone who's controllable beyond this year or is on a longer term contract, they've got to fit your payroll now, fit your roster now, and then the same two things into the future. And if you've got a kid that you like at AA and I'm not so sure that I want to block him with this guy, he's got a big contract, whatever it is. But Soto is so unique that guess what? He is the young guy, right? So he is the young guy. And by the way, without him being on this $500 million deal, like he's making $17 million this year. So he'll get obviously a huge raise, but like the Dodgers can handle that. So can the Padres and so can the Cardinals. So you're not having to bring somebody in who creates all kinds of unwieldy decisions. The Padres outfield has been transient to say the very least this season. So you can put him anywhere you want to. The Cardinals, if they make this deal, they're probably trading them Carlson. They've had some injuries out there. So he fits everybody. And so I think, and Bellinger, he might be let go after this season. So there's ways that he fits all these teams that we're talking about. I think the Yankees, obviously, with the Benintendi move, they're probably no longer in that group of three that make the most sense for Soto, but it's the Yankees and it's hard to know for sure.
Yeah. And with Luis Severino going down, and the Yankees kind of have been a bit more mortal this month in July. Do we see them making a trade for a starting pitcher?
I think they should. And this is where a starter, like one name that makes a ton of sense for a lot of teams that I think it maybe has not been talked about enough is Martin Perez from Texas, because he is someone that has some bullpen experience, great teammate. He's been in the playoffs before, really sort of comfortable personality. When you're already a good team, you want to bring in people that sort of fit your culture and blend well with the clubhouse that you've got. And Martin Perez is a pro, and he understands the deal here. I think Jose Quintana does as well. He's been traded before at the deadline. I think Chad Kuhl is a pretty low maintenance guy. I think those names for me, but I think especially Martin Perez for the Yankees. He's pitched in the AL East before. He's pitched in hitter-friendly ballparks before. I just think he checks a lot of the boxes that you want. And if your rotation is healthier than you expect it to be, he would probably pitch out of the bullpen and do quite well in that role. And certainly with the Michael King situation, they need help there as well. So I do think, and by the way, we think about Texas, you could try to 2-for-1, Matt Moore is there and pitching pretty well to the bullpen as well. So there's a few different possibilities there, but I think the Rangers clearly, with the way the Mariners have played, I think the Rangers are definite sellers. And I would pay very close attention to those two lefties I mentioned there in Perez and Moore.
The starting pitching trade market is always fascinating because, as always, the demand outweighs the supply for starters, but there's a lot out there. Like we talked about Luis Castillo, Frankie Montas. Those would probably be the top two. With Noah Syndergaard is interesting. I know he's, not what he was. Jose Quintana's having a great year. Tyler Mahle has looked healthy since coming off that shoulder scare. Maybe Madison Bumgarner. I know that's a big contract. We talked about Pablo Lopez, Chad Kuhl, Martin Perez. These are pretty high impact starters. If the Giants want to, sell some of their starters, Tarek Skubal, if the Tigers really are serious about listening on him, have you heard any news about what the Tigers plan to do, by the way?
It's a great question. Yeah, certainly here in Michigan, I know there's lots of discussion about it. I don't think that they should trade Skubal for a couple reasons. Number one, they spent a lot of time this year saying that they're beginning a competitive window, and I don't really see how that makes a ton of sense. If you're trading Skubal, you would want to get back a controllable left-handed starter like Derek Skubal. So I just don't know that really is the right strategy to take. And even then, his value is down a little bit from what it was in April and May. So I don't get it. I can understand that the Tigers probably feel as though they should have maximized Fulmer's value and traded him back in 2017 when they had the chance to. They could have gotten probably a significant franchise-changing deal at that point in time. They whiffed. Obviously, Fulmer's done a great job of remaking himself as a really good reliever. But again, the Tigers trading Fulmer in 2017 is much more logical than the Tigers trading Tarek Skubal now because of where they're at with their window. In 2017, it was apparent. It was an old team and had to go through a reboot. Now you're supposed to be better. Torkelson's supposed to be in the major leagues. I mean, I always try to, when I look at teams, don't compound a mistake with another decision along those same lines. Just take a step back. Let's think about what we're doing here. Let's make a good decision. I don't think Skubal is going anywhere. And he shouldn't. I mean, he really should not.
No,
You're not. Yeah, this is not Cleveland trading Clevenger a few years ago. That's not at all the same thing. They really, that should not happen, in my view. I think, you mentioned a couple names. Mahle is one who I think has never been the trendiest name.
He was awesome last year,
Yes.
And he's great away from Great American Ballpark.
Yes,
too.
Precisely. So, and I think you mentioned his form since coming back from the shoulder issue. I think he has a 3 ERA or better since the beginning of June. So I think Mahle is a low key guy to watch here. Montas worries me a bit. There's been injuries and inconsistency there that make me a little hesitant. If I'm a team like the Yankees, maybe, I don't know. I just think when you're the New York Yankees, you bring in somebody, you have to kind of know a little bit about what to expect. And I'm telling you, I think Martin Perez has that. He's pitched in the playoffs before. He's pitched, in some pretty, I remember he started, I think, one of those key games against Toronto, whether it was 15 or 16, as just a younger pitcher. I mean, he's not going to be afraid by Yankee Stadium. And I think that you need to have at least a little bit of understanding. The other team that for me, like, what does Boston do with their pitching? So how does Evaldi look physically? Do you consider moving or like a Nick Pivetta? For me, Boston is to me, their situation should be clearer than a lot of other teams. Their standard is and always should be, can we beat the Yankees? And they can't. Okay. They're not as good as them right now. So your fans are some of the smartest fans in the game. Like, they know what a championship team looks like. They've seen 4 of them in the last 20 years.
Right.
They're not being fooled here. So be real and realize that it's just not happening this year and act accordingly. And I think that's what the Red Sox, as hard as it is to do there, to ask for patience, that's what they've got to do.
I mean,
they're a team I'm watching closely.
If you've seen the hard luck of Chris Sale this year, I mean, that is symptomatic of the Red Sox season in general, the bad luck that he's had. And if you can't have him in your rotation, it's going to be really hard.
That organization's been really good at bouncing back from like a low to a high. They're good at doing it.
Right. And that's exactly right. And I think that they, you think about they've had some guys come up, and obviously to your point, when they bottomed out in 12, they had Bogarts arrive the next year. The 2018 team was very homegrown. Yeah. A lot of really key guys, and certainly most of them have moved on by now. But they've got to find a way. For me, they got to sign Devers. Like Bogarts. I love Bogarts, and I think they should try to sign him too. But Devers put his numbers up there against Juan Soto, and it's, at least right now, man.
Yeah, you can't trade. You can't trade Mookie Betts and then not extend Devers.
Exactly. I mean, that's a great point, Drew. So, like, what's your end game? You are the Boston Red Sox, okay? Like, at some point in time, you can't just like start trading away your generational players that won you a World Series. It just not when you're Boston and not when they're in their 20s. It's different. I'm not talking about the Tigers trading Verlander and Upton when it was apparent that was what they were supposed to do. Yeah. Like, this is a different situation, and they've got to keep at least one of the two. And I just think Devers, with his age and production at that position, is just special.
For sure. And at least with Bogarts, whatever his next contract it's going to be in his 30s. So his decline will come in there sometime. So Devers is the one to sign. And after, letting Betts go as they did and seeing him thrive in Los Angeles, they got to get that done. No question.
They do. I think there's a lot of pressure on them for that reason. And I thought Alex Spear wrote a really good piece about, or it was Chris Gasper actually wrote a great piece about Mookie during the All-Star game, and just he should still be a Red Sox. Like, there should have been a way to make that work, and I think there were some lessons learned there that should inform a relatively discerning judgment on the part of the Red Sox that, okay, whatever our next good team looks like, Devers is playing third base on it. So let's not try to get too clever here. I mean, there's no way that organization can maximize value on Devers, because they need a player like him to help guide them to that next chapter, which seems to be starting right about now.
Go ahead.
We have to ask you about the Angels and Shohei Ohtani. There's no way that happens this summer, right? Like, I mean, we've got 4 days and it would be like the biggest trade. That'd be bigger than Juan Soto, I think. I mean, that news story, even though he only has 1 more year till free agency, he's a guy.
It's like getting 2 for 1, two superstars.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, every team's like, hey, we need a starter and we need a bat. Hey, we just got
Let's get him. Let's go get him. No, so to your point, Drew and DJ, it was interesting. It was a little bit of a thought exercise that I was kind of, mentioning to people in the last several days, sort of before the weekend, to say, okay, if you were going to trade a year and a half of Ohtani versus 2.5 years of Soto, which is more valuable? So obviously Soto has 1 more year, and that's pretty hard to say that it's not Soto. And yet, I mean, if we're going to do the very sort of crude math here, it's like Ohtani's two players, and 1.5 times 2 is greater than 2.5. I don't know. I mean, that's like the most basic math ever, but it's just sort of an absurd way to look at it. But like, we're out of ways to describe Ohtani. Okay. Like, I'm out of words here, guys. I don't know what else to say beyond that. He is just someone that we have never seen before. And so for that reason, the Angels just cannot trade him right now. They just cannot. I mean, I do believe there is at least a segment of the organization. And if I were to sort of offer a little conjecture here, it would seem logical that the front office will do its diligence and say, hey, okay, make me a totally crazy offer for Ohtani, and we'll talk about it. And then I will bring it up to my owner, because that's what you're supposed to do when you're the GM. And so I think that's probably what's happening. I think Artie Moreno, does his calculus change this somewhat, maybe not really, concerning news about Mike Trout's back? Who knows what that all means? I just think that the bar, I'm sure Perry Manassian's talking to people about a lot of things because he's a really good worker, and I think he's a really bright GM. But I don't think that he is going to present an offer to Artie Moreno that Artie looks at and says, yep, this makes us a better organization. I didn't say roster, notice. I said organization, because look at an Angels game. All the advertisements, global companies, partnerships, corporate relationships, sponsorships. Trade the guy who's driven a lot of that in the middle of the year with Trout on the injured list. What are we doing here? So I just think, as hard as it is for them to say, I look at it two different ways. Pure roster management, yeah, you trade them right now.
Yeah.
But that's not the question here. This is not a fancy team. This is a business. And you're trying to get a new ballpark. It's just, this is something where you might lose them. You might lose them for nothing. You might.
Yeah.
But
just
you know
let it
what?
go to free agency.
Right. Yeah. You might lose them for a pick at the end of the day. But you know what? Let's not forget, and I'm just, this is sort of maybe my sense of fairness here a little bit. You got them for darn near nothing to begin with. Okay.
Yep.
Right.
So let's not get greedy here. You didn't have to give them a 9-figure deal to bring them over. Okay. So let's not say, well, where's my big payout? That's not really how this whole relationship started. Okay. So I think for me, you kind of got to do right by now, unless he comes to you and says, I want out and I'm not happy here anymore. I don't think he's done that. I think he's kind of tired of losing.
He's kind of hinted that he wants to test free agency. Yeah.
And so that's where, I would say the only way that this happens, okay, is if Ohtani goes to Artie and Perry and says, listen, to circle back to what we just talked about, you got me for on a pretty darn good deal. I would submit the best and most team-friendly signing bonus in the modern history of professional sports. Okay.
Yeah, hard to argue.
So period. I mean, show me a better deal than that. So if he comes to you and says, listen, I gave you guys 4.5 years of primo production, and the situation here that I'm seeing, I don't like. You got me at a bargain to begin with, and I want out. If that's what his agent says to Artie, and if Artie says, I want to do right by you, and my obligation is to you, and to sort of do the right thing for you and for the sport, if they feel like him going to fill in the blank team is better for baseball, I can accept that. But the only way this deal happens, in my view, is if it's driven by Shohei Ohtani himself.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's a real good summation of that situation. I wouldn't. Yeah, I think it's just going to go to free agency, and then it's going to be assuming he's still doing what he's doing, what he's done. I think it's going to be the craziest bidding war. How do you even value the guy?
Well, that's it, Drew. That's a great point. And that's why, and the only part of that thought exercise with comparing 2.5 years of Soto with 1.5 of Ohtani that sort of trips me up a little bit is that, to your point, we're one elbow twinge away from this whole plan not being what it is. And I'm a little more sure of what Juan Soto looks like in 2 years than I am Ohtani, just because of the uniqueness of the overall plan. I
think he's just going to break the AAV record by double.
And if he keeps it up, he should.
He should.
God bless, man. It's amazing.
I would struggle if I was an owner to give him 10 years, but if you could do 5 years, $75 million a year or something. Like something. It's going to be a weird.
Oh, he'll break the
weird-
AAV. Yeah, he'll break
Yeah.
the Max Scherzer AAV. There's no
Totally.
question about that. So there's a trade that's been reported. It's not a major trade, but it's one I'm still trying to figure out as a Mets fan. So Ken Rosenthal, our buddy, he reports the Mets are acquiring Tyler Naquin and
Interesting.
left-handed reliever Philip Deal from the Reds, minor leaguers going to the Reds. I don't understand that one because Naquin is a left-handed outfielder. The Mets
He's pretty good.
just
It's just
yeah. I
weird.
mean, he could. I mean, he's a good fielder. But I don't know what that does. That mean maybe someone's hurt? I don't know. Like I'm trying to figure that one out. Honestly,
Could be. I'm thinking about their group. I mean, obviously they've had some injury issues with Canna a little bit earlier in the year. Marte's been pretty durable this year, but certainly by his standards. It is a little surprising, but what it also leads me to believe is that there's maybe another move that sort of hinges on it. I mean, I think obviously Dom Smith has had some interest, and certainly I know he's spent a lot of the year at the minor league level, but maybe they want to get a little extra protection. I mean, the good thing for the Mets, where they're fortunate, is they've got, and this is where Buck Showalter always knows how to get the most out of his players. They have one of the very best, in my view, sort of utility multi-position infielders in Guillorme, who I think is I think Guillorme is really good. And McNeil is hitting again, and Escobar has picked it up a little bit since the beginning of the year. I think that they got a really good team, and I think that they, Naquin is a good depth piece. Obviously, this is not a show-stopping type of a trade, but I think it addresses a need, and maybe to your point, if Nimmo or anybody else, if there's any kind of issue that they've got with their outfield, Naquin can address a lot of he's good coverage for you. And let's remember about where we're at as a sport. There's no more August 31. So you got to if you're going to make your move, sometimes I think, we might see teams making moves to add a second lefty that they'll be able to park a AAA for a while, a third catcher to put a AAA. Those kinds of moves, I think, are important, and they can help a team. And I think it's a key way to sort of build up that kind of a depth this time of year.
Yeah, I think what they've done really well under Steve Cohen that they didn't always do, even when they were running a decent payroll, is add depth pieces. Like, it's not all about the superstars. You need guys that can get you through a season, and maybe this is part of some other kind of deal too.
Yeah,
I think they've got their hands in a lot of pots. I think them and the Cubs are going to link up at some point over the next 4 days as well.
Daniel Robertson is probably one of the biggest names on the relief market. And it does seem like, maybe you've heard this too, JP, the relief market seems thinner than I'm used to seeing it. Are you getting the same idea?
I think to a degree, but I would also say, DJ, that sometimes relievers that you don't expect to move will move. Guys that have a little more control on them. I think that's another thing. Who was talking about Clay Holmes last year before the deadline? And all of a sudden he's become a game-changing reliever back there. So that for me, I think that, and we might see it happen more towards August 2nd. But when you're talking trade with a team, I think the savvy GMs. And it's sort of that last little bit of negotiating. And it's always, you don't want to jeopardize a deal over this, but it's important. When in doubt, ask for the extra reliever. So like once you've really gotten down the line, once a team has negotiated with the Nationals on Soto all the way to the end, they say, wait a minute, how about Finnegan too? How about Cishek? It's like, are they going to say no at that point? I mean, probably not. And so I think that's kind of the Clay Holmes story. I mean, like that. I mean, granted, the Yankees had some pretty good reports on him, obviously, but that's the kind of move that can change a team. And so Clay Holmes was not a pending free agent, but he was a guy that made sense because of where the Pirates were. So if you're the Tigers, I don't think that Gregory Soto is going anywhere. I would be stunned if he did, but Joe Jimenez might, and they've got Andrew Chafin, they've got Fulmer. I mean, so all those guys should be in play. The Royals, they've got a number of relievers that should be in play, not just the obvious, maybe like a Scott Barlow. I mean, they should move a lot of different guys. I mean, once you're clearly a seller, own it, right?
Yeah, unload the bullpen.
Right. There are very few teams in the American League, at least, that are like obvious. you should move your bullpen pieces. Detroit, yes. KC, yes. Oakland, the Angels, and probably Texas. So only 5, really. I mean, that's that's not
sure.
It's not that many, but again, Texas should move more. Those are the kind of decisions that you probably should look to make, and probably even some names that are not as obvious besides more, because you're not going for a guy like in Oakland, Trevino or Lou Trevino, who is not really having by numbers an awesome year, but he's been there before, and he could just as easily have a great second half, even if he had the first half that was a little up and down. I think Trevino's a guy that I'd watch carefully this year at the deadline.
Daniel Bard.
Bard.
Yep, there you go.
We've talked about control, like you were mentioning, controllable relievers. Sometimes that's a surprise, and these guys end up being dealt. Drew and I have talked, I'd say over the past month, a couple of times. We mentioned David Bednar with the Pirates. That seems like a perfect example of a surprise kind of reliever who could be moved, because the Pirates aren't likely to be a contender in the next 2, maybe 3 years. Who knows if David Bednar will be healthy or effective once they're ready to contend. It seems like a situation where they should capitalize. I don't know if they will, but I think that would make sense.
Right. No, I agree. It sort of goes back to like the Ken Giles trade, that sort of construct. Like when you've got a closer and he's on a non-contending team, make the move now. I think there is some wisdom there. I also think that the Pirates, they've shown some signs of life to where, do you need to, I mean, for me, like if you get 2 legitimate frontline starters that are really going to help you, because you've got your shortstop, which is great. You've got your third baseman. That's great too. So you're starting to fill in some pieces is kind of what I'm getting at here. But if trading Bednar gives you a couple starting pitchers that you really like, that are going to be able to potentially be in your rotation in the next couple of years, like you do it. You think about, I go back like the Marcus Stroman deal with Toronto. He was in his walk year, but they got 2 arms from New York. We can talk about if that deal actually worked out for both sides or not, but at least that the concept is, trade the reliever. And if you get 2 starters back that you like, and if you think they're going to start for you, do it. And so I would expect that Pittsburgh will be open-minded. I think the price tag is going to be high, and it should be, but I'm with you. I think that it's a logical time for them to explore that exact possibility.
I feel like we've covered a lot of angles.
The Cubs. I think like that's one team we need to talk about
Contreras, a little bit. Contreras for me is definitely gone. I think Happ probably.
Robertson.
Robertson is it for sure. I think Contreras, whether it's, the Mets make a ton of sense there.
Houston, every contender, it feels like, needs a better offense at catcher, right?
Right.
Almost every contender. I guess Alejandro, Toronto's fine,
except for Toronto, who has 3 catchers. And that's one team that I'm watching. Do you trade Gabriel Moreno at this point in time? Do you trade a Danny Jansen? Kirk, to me, keep him, love him. Don't move that guy. But I think the other 2 catchers, Toronto's in such a unique position because they've had to give up some players from the minor leagues in the last couple of years. So don't do that again. Just maybe give up a major league catcher, because a lot of teams that are just starting to build themselves up again need a legitimate good major league catcher. And Gabriel Moreno and Jansen are more than qualified on those merits.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, we will have to have you back because the World Baseball Classic is coming.
Amen.
We love the World Baseball Classic.
So we will definitely have you back to talk about the World Baseball Classic. But trade deadline, we got to get through that first. We had the postseason, but I miss the World Baseball Classic. It's so much fun.
Me too.
And I'm sure you do too.
Oh, love it. So you call me any day, any cold January day when you need a topic. Send me that email that says, "Hey John, we got to talk about how the Puerto Rican infield is going to look," and I'll be there. 5 minutes, guys. I'll be there in 5 minutes. We're going to do Baez, Correa. Where are we all going to be? You just let me know, and we'll make it happen. Okay.
I love the enthusiasm.
JP.
Thank you so much.
Guys. Thank you. Thanks, Drew. It was my pleasure. Enjoy the trade deadline in the second half here, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So for our listeners, just a quick note before we go. Weekends are better with MLB Sunday leadoff coverage presented by Uber Eats. Catch the Tigers take on the Blue Jays in Toronto on Sunday, July 31st at 11:30 Eastern, live on Peacock. To learn more, go to peacocktv.com/MLB. And if you want a chance to win $25,000 on the game, Download the NBC Sports Predictor app powered by PointsBet and enter Sunday's free Grand Slam Pick'em contest. If you like what you're hearing with this show, make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review if you don't mind. Follow us on Twitter if you don't already. I'm at DJ Short. Drew is at Drew Silva. Take care, everyone, and we will see you next time.